In this video, I'm going to talk about adjustment layers. If you ever can't find your adjustment layers, they are right here. But if you ever can't find them, you can go Window, Adjustments, and click on that to make your adjustment layers show up again right here if they ever get turned off for some reason. So there are a lot of icons here that are all adjustment layers. If you click on one of these, they will populate into your Layers panel. We're going to talk about a few of the most important ones for our processes right now. The first one we're going to talk about is brightness and contrast. If you click on the brightness and contrast adjustment layer, you can change the overall contrast of your picture, make it less or more. Typically you don't want to do extreme edits, you want to do gradual edits so they look realistic. I might brighten my picture a little bit, too much, darkened too much. I actually think I might darken this picture a little bit. And then I can X this little box, but if I ever want to pull up those options again, I just double click on that layer and I get those options again, and I can X that box again. My next adjustment layer is called Levels. These levels show you a histogram of the bright and dark values in your picture. If you want to adjust your contrast and shadows and highlights from this screen, you change these little triangle knobs and pull them left and right to adjust the contrast in your picture. This is a drastic edit right here. If I ever do something that I don't like, I can always go and delete that layer, and I'm back to the beginning before I had it. The next adjustment layer is Curves. Curves gives you a graph kind of like this. Typically you want to do a very shallow S-curve, and that will make almost any picture look better. It brings the highlights out a little bit, it brings the shadows out a little bit, and makes it look a little bit better. You can do multiple points just by clicking on this curve to change it more minutely. The next one across here is Exposure. This would be if your settings were way off in your camera and you wanted to change the exposure to be brighter or darker post-processing. Typically you want to get a pretty good exposure in your camera by changing your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO to get an appropriate exposure and make sure that your exposure reader is at 0. But if you don't get that right, this is a place where you can correct that after taking the pictures. So I'm not going to use that layer right now, so I'm going to delete it. You always want to delete unused layers. Vibrance can be a fun one. You can desaturate your picture and make it look almost completely black and white, or you can make it look just a little bit less vibrant or a little bit more desaturated. That's kind of a in look these days. You can bring down the vibrance a little bit, make it look more like an old-fashioned film photo, or you can make it more bright and saturated and make the colors really pop. Again, you always want to do gradual edits so that you're not changing things too much. You don't want it to look super photoshopped. The other layers in here, hue, saturation, you can play with different saturation of specific colors and hues of your picture. You can really make things go crazy. I'm not going to use that layer today. And color balance, black and white filter, photo filter, channel mixer, color lookup, invert, posterize, threshold, selective color, gradient map. You can play with any of these. The first 5 are most effective for our editing at this point. We will get into more depth with other tools later. So these are adjustment layers. They show up as separate panels on top of your background. You can turn off or turn back on any of these changes to see if you liked them, and then delete or add more to your picture.